Hey guys, this is going to be a complete walkthrough from creating your first canvas, getting used to the Apple Pencil, the best brush for sketching, different ways to color, and finally how to finish your artworks to really make them pop. This is going to be a big one, so let's jump in. This is the gallery page, and if you've just started with Procreate, you probably can only see the cube default artworks here at the bottom. You can see I've been pretty busy, so I've got a lot of stuff here. There's only one way to organize your artworks, and that's through something called stacks. And so I can create a stack by selecting one of my artworks and then moving it on top of another artwork, and then that groups them together into a stack. The other main thing you can do with the gallery page is create a new canvas. So if we go up here to the plus sign, you can see there's a bunch of presets here, and it has some details on what those presets are about. So this little sRGB and P3, that's the color space of the artwork, and then these are obviously the dimensions. Now if we click this plus button here, we can create our own canvas that we can configure ourselves. Here we can set the width and the height. So I'm going to make this a desktop wallpaper, 1920 by 1080, and here you can set the DPI. And usually for DPI, you want it to be on 300 if you're going to print, but if your image is only for screen, you can go as low as 72 DPI, it doesn't really matter. You can see here it says maximum layers, and you'll notice as I increase the resolution, let's say I increase this to like 4000, you can see the maximum layers has reduced. So before that was on 500. So basically the larger your canvas is in terms of dimensions, the less layers you can have. And this depends on the amount of RAM that's in your iPad. The next setting we've got right here is color profile. And I like to go with RGB and set it to this one right here, this second one. I won't go into all the details of these because personally I don't know them. But what I do know is that RGB is generally for screens, but CMYK is for artwork that you're going to be printing out on professional printing machines. Having said that, it doesn't mean that if you choose RGB you can't print. You still can. You just might not get that 100% color accuracy that CMYK will give. So personally I just like to choose this setting as kind of a catch-all. It will work for 99% of scenarios. The one thing you should know is that you can't switch between RGB and CMYK mid artwork, so you do need to make that decision beforehand, but you can switch between the individual profiles within these umbrella settings mid artwork. So I wouldn't stress too much about this part, but you definitely need to make the decision between these two before you start. Okay, the next is time-lapse settings. So these are actually the settings that Procreate uses to record a video of your artwork as you paint. So that's a really cool feature of Procreate. And what I like to do is set it to the highest quality, so 4K. And I don't go lossless, but I'll do studio quality. So I think that's a pretty good level of quality that won't take up too much room on your hard drive either. All right, let's go to canvas properties. Here you can set the default background color and whether the background is hidden or not. I leave the background on, but I like to change this default color to a more neutral gray. Okay, let's hit create it. Welcome to your first artwork. So I'm just going to cover some of these UI settings just so you have an idea of what's going on and where to find things. First we have the wrench icon or the actions menu. And these are more general actions and settings and preferences that you might use throughout your process. There's a bunch of subsections in here. Next, we've got this magic wand, and this is the adjustments menu. And this is all about different kinds of filters and effects, things you can do to adjust your image. Next is the selection menu, and this will allow you to cut out and grab different parts of your artwork to manipulate it, maybe fill with color, and allows you to create various different shapes. Finally, once you've made a selection, we have this arrow tool, which will allow you to transform those selections. Jumping over to the right, we've got our brush, we've got our smudge tool, we've got our eraser, and for each of these you can actually click on them and then you can get access to a variety of different brushes you can use. And that applies across all of these, so smudging and also erasing. So for the eraser, you can erase with like a weird texture like that, or you could erase just with like a really simple hard brush like that. The next section is super important. This is the layers panel, and this is where you can create various layers in order to manipulate your artwork. Finally, we have the color picker here, and this shows you a disk where you can change the hue, adjust the brightness and saturation like that. You also have different ways of viewing this color wheel. You can do the classic setting like this. You can also do harmony, which allows you to select colors and it'll give you the colors that are harmonious to that. And you can adjust this as well by choosing maybe complementary colors, and now you're just getting the complement of that color that you're choosing. Here we've got triadic, which is giving you 3 options. You can play around with it, but it's a really cool feature. Okay, so that was color. The final thing on this UI that you can see here is these 2 bars here, and this is your brush size slider. So size is percentage, and I can increase it or decrease it. And then here is your opacity slider, which adjusts how opaque your brush is. So down here is more transparent, and then up here is completely solid. We've also got undo and redo here. And then we've also got this interesting square here, which is actually a configurable button. You can assign it to various tasks to help you with your workflow. So now that the tour is out of the way, what should you actually do to set up Procreate? Here are 5 settings that will make your life a bit easier. So the first one is you should go up to the Actions menu and then go to Preferences. And the first thing here is right hand interface. So by default, I think this is off and it's right here. But personally, I'm a left-hander. That's weird. Yeah, why would I want that on the right-hand side? That only just occurred to me. Anyway, the point is this setting here called right hand interface. And I've always had it set to the right-hand side. I just like having my UI elements on the right here and not here on the left. But actually it makes more sense for me to put it over here on the left because I'm left-handed, right? So anyway, you can configure this however you like. But yeah, I'm going to put it here for now because yeah, makes a lot of sense. So let's put it there. The second thing I did when I first started was I went here to gesture controls and then go to general and then turn off rotate with pinch zoom. So that means now when I zoom in and out, see how I can't actually rotate the canvas anymore. It's staying in that one plane. And I guess coming from Photoshop, I just really liked that. I didn't like how it was rotating and then you'd feel like the canvas was kind of off center and you didn't know whether you were drawing a straight line or not. The next problem I had was a lot of the times I found the eraser kept turning on, and that was likely because of a gesture control issue as well. So I go here to gesture controls, and what I like to do is I like to turn off all of these and just have this bottom section on. And what that means is whenever you push that configurable button and then use the Apple Pencil, it will become an eraser. So if I go here and if I hold this button down while I use the Apple Pencil, it becomes an eraser. But that actually doesn't work because I'm going to be using the Apple Pencil here, so how can I erase? See, that's the interesting thing about Procreate. It's fully configurable. Okay, so let me go back here, turn right hand interface on, and so now if I paint something like that, then I hold down this button and do that, it's erasing automatically. And the reason that's really useful is it means I don't have to keep reaching up here to hit the eraser button. Now I can just erase like that. The fourth setting I changed when I first started was going up here to the wrench, then going to gesture controls again, and then going to quick menu, and then turning this on. So what that means is when I tap that configurable button, it'll invoke or dismiss the quick menu. So let's go back here, and if I click that, there it is, there's the quick menu. The quick menu is super useful and it gives you these 6 configurable buttons that you can change. So all I have to do is hold down on that button and it gives me a menu of the different actions I can assign to that button. And the really cool thing about the quick menu is as I'm drawing, that quick menu will appear wherever my stylus is. So let's say I'm drawing over here and then I invoke the quick menu, it appears here. Let's say I'm drawing over here, invoke the quick menu, it appears here. So it's really close to my stylus and I can just access those buttons straight away. So for example, let's say I'm painting here and then I invoke the quick menu and then I can do select brush and it'll switch me to the brush that I want to use, which is the brush I'm already on. But if I wanted to do that normally, I'd have to go, let's say I was painting and then I want to switch brush, I'd have to go up here, choose my brush and then come back. So it saves you that jump, which is super useful, I think. The fifth useful setting isn't really a setting that you change or anything, but it's just useful to know that it's there. So if you go up here to the actions icon and then go to canvas and then canvas information, this is going to show you all the details about this canvas. So you can actually rename your artwork, you can sign it, you can see the dimensions that you're working in. You can also see maximum layers and the amount of layers you've used. So I've used 1 out of 500. And they even give you some information on the types of layers you've got here. We go to the color profile, you can see the color profile we set, and you can actually change it here. We can move on to video settings like before. Finally, we can also see statistics, which is pretty interesting. It shows you how many strokes you've made and then also your tracked time. So 20 minutes, total file size 0.48 megabytes and 15 strokes. So those are the 5 settings I tweaked when I first started with Procreate. But there is one more setting that is really, really important and it can completely make or break your experience with the iPad, Procreate and the Apple Pencil. And that feature is called the pressure curve. The pressure curve can be found in the actions menu in the preferences section labeled pressure and smoothing. So you can see my pressure curve right here. I actually made an entire video on this explaining it. So if you want, you can go watch that video. But what I'm going to try to do is explain it right here so you don't have to jump out of this video. By default, you'll see this curve is actually just a diagonal from the left to the right. And what this graph will do is allow you to adjust the feeling of the Apple Pencil to suit your style of pressing. So whether you're a hard presser, a soft presser, and so this is very subjective, but the best way to understand this is actually just to start by laying down some color. So let's grab a brush. Let's go to our sketching. Let's choose the 6B pencil, and I'm just going to lay down some color. Actually, that's pretty ugly. Let's change it to black. There we go. Okay, so lay down some color like that. And do this yourself as well. So try to feel the levels of pressure or the depth of pressure. So for example, if I just press lightly, that's really light. And then if I press harder, now we're feeling more pressure and it's getting blacker and darker. And depending on your hand, whether that feels natural or not is up to you really. So maybe you're pressing lightly and you're feeling like more pigment should be coming out and you feel like that's not right, like it needs to come out more. That means you'll need to adjust the pressure curve. Similarly, maybe you're just pressing normally on the thing and then too much pigment is coming out. So then that's also when you'll need to adjust the pressure curve to reduce the amount of pigment coming out. And just for those that maybe are a bit ahead, yes, you can adjust the individual brush settings themselves, but before you go into any of these settings to adjust how much pigment is coming out and anything like that, always nail the pressure curve first, because this is a global setting and it will dictate how all those individual brush settings will feel later on. So let's explain this in a bit more depth. Let me just clear this. And for me personally, I like to do a lot of preliminary line work and just kind of get a feel for things. So I'm doing a lot of light sketching. Maybe I'll do some construction lines, this kind of thing. And I don't want these lines to be really solid or dark. I just want them to be really light. So I'm putting the eyes in. I don't like it. Let's start again. Okay. So yeah, I'm putting in like this, just getting a feel for what I'm drawing, and I'm just pressing really lightly. So naturally, when I press lightly, I don't want a lot of pigment to come out of my brush, right? So what I'm saying is when I press, I'm pressing only at maybe like 20%, and I don't want much to come out. And I found that when I first started with Procreate, and when I was pressing lightly, a lot of pigment was coming out and it was just being way too dark and way too strong. So maybe like that, right? So what I had to do was go into the pressure curve and see how I place a node down here. That means that when I'm sketching with light pressure in my hand, I want less pigment to come out from the pencil and from Procreate so that it's nice and light and sketchy. If I move this node higher up, it means I would only need to put light pressure and lots of pigment would come out. So hopefully now you're kind of starting to see the relationship between these nodes and what's happening in your hand. But the best way to describe it is, so this is the x-axis and this is the y-axis. The x-axis represents your pressure that you're putting through your hand into the pencil and onto the physical screen. And then this y-axis is actually representing how Procreate and the software interprets your pressure. So you can see how this grid is broken into 4 sections. So you could say this represents 25%, this represents 50%, this represents 75%, and obviously 100% here. So I'm essentially telling Procreate, when I use 25% of my power, only input maybe 12.5% of pigment, or in this case, registered pressure. Whereas before, if this was just a straight diagonal from left to right, if I input 25% of my strength, it'll show 25% of registered pressure or pigment. So this is how I'm manipulating the curve. I'm telling it, when I input this little pressure, register that as even less pressure. Similarly here on the other end of the curve, I'm saying when I input 75% of my pressure, register that as maximum pressure, so 100%. And that's so that I don't have to push all the way down, like with 100% of my force, to get that deep black. So I hope that makes sense. If not, please go watch my other video that might help you and just play around with it a bit. Everyone is different. So this is a really subjective thing. It's hard to give a black and white answer as to which curve is right for you. In this next section, I want to talk about sketching tips, including which default brush I think is the best for sketching, how to hold the Apple Pencil, and 2 super useful Procreate features that almost feel like cheating. Let's go to the brush menu here, and I've got the HB pencil selected, and personally I think this is the best default sketching brush in all of Procreate. And yes, I believe it's better than the Procreate pencil. That was my first reaction when I started with Procreate. I was like, Procreate pencil, that must be good. So I chose it and I started drawing, but I don't know, I just don't really like it. It feels really fuzzy, and I get that that's meant to be a texture, but I don't know, it doesn't look good to me. So I personally prefer the HB pencil. And the reason I choose the HB pencil is because it actually feels like an HB pencil. So if I just draw like this, you can see I can get a pretty good range of, lights and darks. And the other thing I really like about this pencil is the tilt. So for example, drawing like this straight on, I'm getting a really thin line, but if I draw like this at an angle, you can see I'm starting to get some really interesting, you can kind of shade like that, and it changes the dynamic of the brush. See, like that. And it really does feel like a HB pencil, which is amazing. One thing that I experienced when I first started was I didn't understand how to draw with this pencil, and I was kind of assuming it would be like my old Wacom tablet, where I used to press really hard with that, and I wasn't used to any of the nuance of like having angles. And so I really couldn't appreciate a lot of these brushes, and it wasn't until many months later that I really got the hang of this brush and just how to hold the Apple Pencil. So if you do have any preconceived notions about how to use a stylus, maybe you're used to pressing really hard or pushing in, what I recommend is really just treat it really lightly and just try to understand the nuance of the pen, because there really is a lot, and it's quite amazing what Apple have done creating this pen. Okay, so I should probably actually draw something. So I'm going to jump out of this canvas. I'm going to jump into this drawing that I've been working on for a while, and I'm really excited to do. But let me just turn off some of these color layers and get to the sketch, which has disappeared. Let me bring it back up. So the brush I'm sketching with when I'm not using the HB pencil is actually my own personal brush. So up here in Jay's Essentials, the soft sketcher brush. And this brush is meant to emulate Photoshop, what I'm used to. So when I draw, it just looks like that. There's no angles or anything like that. Just has a really nice taper. Kind of feels like a hard air brush, really. You get this brush and my entire brush set at jaywalkerpictures.com. Of course, no pressure though, but if you do purchase, it does help support my art and the channel. Okay, so most of this sketch is fleshed out. I mean, this video is not about how to draw per se, but one feature that's really helpful when you're sketching is actually here in the adjustments menu. You can go to liquify, and if you have push set, you can move your lines around. So for example, if my arm is a bit too wonky, I can bring it out a bit. You can just really fine-tune line work that way, but because I'm going to be painting this, I'm not too concerned with my line work being perfect, but it's a really useful tool. The other useful thing to know when you're sketching is you can draw completely straight lines. So for example, I want to draw some roofs here, right? Like that. But the lines are kind of wobbly. So what I can do is undo that. If I draw a line like that and just hold it down, it becomes straight. Boom, see, like that. And then now I have a perfectly straight line. Just keeps things really clean. You can also, if I put down a line like that and it's straight, and if I put a finger on, it'll snap that to a certain angle. See, so like that. If I let it go, it'll be completely freeform like that. But yeah, if I want to snap it to a specific angle, yeah, like that. Really, really useful feature. Okay, I think I'm done with the sketch. I don't want to go too in depth, but before we get into the painting phase, I want to talk about gestures. So you probably saw me throughout that process double tapping on the canvas, and that will allow you to undo whatever strokes you make. So for example, if I do this, double tap, undo, triple tap to bring it back. There we go. And let's say I make a couple of strokes. If I keep double tapping, it'll make them all disappear. Similarly, if I triple tap, they'll come back. And you can also rapid undo. So if I double tap and then hold down, it'll just rapidly undo it like that. I can do the same for triple tap come back. There we go, they came back. But be careful with that, because when you rapidly undo, it'll just quickly just undo everything, and you can lose a lot of work that way. So it's pretty dangerous. Just try not to hold it down. The next thing you can do is just scrub the layer to clear it. There you go. Let's undo that. The next really important gesture will allow you to invoke the color picker. So if I hold my finger on the canvas, now you can see I'm picking whichever color I go over. So it's getting dark here, and then it allows me to pick that color. This will come really in handy later on when we're painting. We can do a 3-finger swipe down, and it'll bring up this copy and paste menu, and it gives you a bunch of options, and it just makes it easier than having to go up here to the actions menu and then hit add, and then do copy and paste that way. If you tap the screen with 4 fingers, that's going to put you into full screen mode. So yeah, now there's no more UI. Yeah, so I'm drawing freely in full screen mode, but we don't want to do that, of course. Now let's undo that, undo those strokes as well. And let's go back to our UI mode. And just to expand on what I said before, if I do a line and then I hold down, it becomes a straight line. And if I hold down, I can angle it that way with that gesture. But this feature is actually way more powerful than that. I can go up here to line, and I can edit the line or the ellipse. It's actually interpreting it as potentially being an ellipse, so I can change it that way, or just go back to a line, what it is. But this is kind of alluding to some more power that this feature has. This is called quick shape. So I can actually draw a circle, and if I hold it down, it becomes a perfect oval, but I can make it into a perfect circle by doing that. And that's simply amazing. It's such a nice quality of life thing. And if I go up here, you can actually see that it's giving me some options for different types of shapes. So I can actually turn this into a square, turn it into a quadrilateral, a rectangle, back to an ellipse, but we're going to stick with circle. And those are some of the other shapes that you can create. So it's not just circles. Like I can do something like this, and yeah, if I hold down, it's going to make it like that. If I put my finger, it's going to constrain it. Now, because it couldn't interpret that this was a perfect square or rectangle, it's calling it a polyline. So now I can actually edit it. It's kind of like a vector almost. And it's kind of broken down my strokes into individual vectors. I don't think I can call them vectors because they're not actually vectors, but yeah, it's kind of programmatic that way. But once I exit this mode, it becomes like a raster line image, and you can't edit it anymore. So just keep that in mind. Like once you're done, there's no more of that. So yeah, I can't go back to that editing mode. I can do a perfect square. Let me try like this. Yeah, that's a bit better. And see, it's registering it as a square. I can change it to a polyline if I want, or I can just edit it this way as well. So yeah, like that. But if I change it to a polyline, I think I get access to each individual node. Yeah, see, so I can break that open. That's a super powerful tool, and I was really blown away when I found that in Procreate. All right, I got to get rid of some of these, and let's move on to coloring. The first thing I want to talk about is the different ways of coloring in Procreate. So there's actually many different ways to color. There's no right or wrong way, but I feel like they generally fall into these 3 categories. The first one is airbrushing, and I'll just show you that simply by adding some background color to this image. So I've already got kind of like a light blue, but I'm going to go to my disk, and I want to make it a bit darker, a bit more blue. And I'm just going to drag that color onto the canvas to fill the whole canvas. And what I want to do is just create a nice gradient for the sky color using the airbrush, so you can see that technique of blending with the airbrush. So I'm going to go to my brushes. I'm going to go to airbrushing and choose the soft brush, and I'm going to increase the size to quite a large size. Maybe put it at about 50%. Actually, no, I'm going to increase the opacity to 100%, and we're just going to be really gentle with it. So on my layers, I'm going to do a layer above this blue background, and now I'm going to go to the color wheel. I'm going to choose kind of like a light bluey yellow color, something like that. And I'm going to start with the bottom of the horizon. And you can see that color coming in, and you can see how it's a really smooth gradient. I've got a really big airbrush right now, so it's covering a lot of area. But yeah, you can see how that is one way of painting. Like, it's a really smooth way of painting, but me personally, I only like to use it for large spaces. I don't particularly like it for the actual painting of details and things like that, because you lose a lot of the character of the brush strokes. All you see is this, gradient. Recently I got a question from a viewer about how to create a gradient in Procreate, and there actually isn't like a programmatic way to do a gradient, not like Photoshop or Illustrator where you could, select two colors and then drag a gradient across and fill the whole canvas. You just have to do it manually like this. So, just lay down your base color, which is blue, select your highlight color and then airbrush it in and create the gradient yourself. The second style of painting is cell shading, and let me just demonstrate that with the tree here. So I'm going to create a new layer on top of this sky layer, and this is going to be the cut layer for my bush, or the foliage of this tree. And I'm going to choose kind of like a light pinkish color because this is actually meant to be a cherry blossom. And I'm going to choose my hard brush in the airbrushing section, and I just want to paint and fill in that shape. Okay, that's pretty good. Now go to your layers panel and create a new layer above this, and we're going to use a feature that is really crucial to many artists' workflows, and I'm sure you guys are going to come back to it over and over again. So we're going to turn this layer into a clipping mask. And what that means is whenever I paint anything on this new layer that's above layer 38, my strokes are going to be constrained to the shape of layer 38, or my brush strokes are only going to appear within this shape that's defined by layer 38. So just to show you, if I change this to a really, blue color, and then I try to paint, see, it's only appearing inside of that clipping mask. And so we're going to use this to paint our shadows and highlights. I'm going to change this color to a slightly lighter color, and so if you imagine the light source is coming from above, and then we'll do the same again. Let's create another clipping mask, and this will be our highlights. So I'm going to select that color, and then I'm going to boost it up a bit, and just imagine if something like that. The third style of coloring is the one that I prefer personally, and that is painting, or just, using Procreate like it was a canvas and painting and mixing colors that way. So I'm going to go back to my brush. I'm still on the hard brush, and I'm going to go to, for example, this highlight layer, and I can actually blend the highlight layer into the midtones. And I do it this way. I do it by using the color picker, picking the color that I want to blend, and just working it in like that. And using pressure sensitivity, you could even use opacity to lower it a bit. And then picking that new color that's been formed from those brush strokes, and then working that in. And then, slowly as you keep doing this process, you start to develop kind of like a blend that has a nice painterly texture to it. It feels really organic, and it's just a really nice way of working. It's kind of meditative, actually. It feels like I'm really painting, like mixing colors, pushing them around. And just like with cell shading, it can be really simple. You could just do it like this, or there are many, many tricks. And as you learn to grow with your knowledge of textures and also lighting, you can really push this to become a really striking art style. You can also use different types of brushes. So right now I'm just using the hard brush, but if I go to textures and choose something like Melaleuca, I can add some variation and texture to my strokes. So if I place that down, you can see how it's completely changed the character of what I'm painting and drawing. And see how like this brush is pretty wild, like see how it's just jittering and moving all over the place. So the good thing about having that clipping mask is it just really constrains it to that original shape that I drew, and I don't need to worry about that texture bleeding out into the rest of my canvas. First thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to remove these two clipping masks because I don't think I like what I was doing. I was just doing those to demonstrate the different styles of painting, but we're going to start with this. That'll work. But the thing with this color is I feel like it's a bit too pink, and I want to brighten it up a bit. Now I could brighten it up by repainting over the top, but I'm a bit lazy. So the shortcut way to do this is actually to go here to the magic wand, which is the adjustments menu, and just do the hue, saturation, brightness, and just boost that brightness a bit. And you can see I can also adjust the saturation as well. I can make that really pink, or I can desaturate it completely. Let's just put it back to the middle. I can also change the hue like this. Okay, I want to show you guys one really important feature that is probably just as important, if not more important than clipping masks, and it's really similar as well. So I just painted my little character's black eyes, and if my painting is going to be really painterly, fully black eyes may not be the most realistic situation. And I want to lighten up that color, but I don't want to lighten up all the line work, because if I use a brightness contrast adjustment, that's just going to lighten the whole thing like that, and I don't want that. I just want to lighten these two eyes and the mouth. So what I can do is I can go to my layer with my little dude and turn on alpha lock. And you can see here, now that I've turned that on, the layer has like a checkered background, and that means it's transparent, and that my brush strokes are locked to only filling the parts of the layer that aren't transparent or aren't checkered. See, so if I turn off alpha lock, you can see it's gone back to a solid or opaque layer. If I turn it back on, there's that transparency. So now if I grab, let's say a crazy color like red, and then I draw it over this layer, it'll only draw or color or fill in those parts that are opaque. So because there's a lot of grass around my little dude, I think a bit of that green might be reflected in his eyes. So I want to lighten him up like that a bit. And yeah, it just gives a bit of a softening effect. And you can do this with all of your line work and really make your character sit in the scene properly. Okay, I've been drawing for a while, a lot has changed, but I just want to show you guys this feature related to this bridge that I'm drawing here. So you can see I've got like the line work, I've got the top of the bridge, and then I've got this pylon here. So if I go and turn off the line work, let's turn that off, and you can see this is my layer with the bridge and the pylon stuck together, and you can see it right here. And what I want to do is I want to separate this pylon out from the bridge onto another layer, and the way I can do that is using the selection tool. So this is a tool that I didn't really show before, but you can see there's 4 different types of selections I can make: automatic, freehand, rectangle, and ellipse. And I want to use the freehand selection, and I want to just select this part. Let's see if I can do that like that, and then I'm just going to copy and paste it. So now I have that pylon pasted onto a new layer, and then I've got the original pylon still there on that old layer. So I want to get rid of that. Let me just hide that first, and let's just erase. Let me bring that back in. Yeah, so that is the selection tool. It's this squiggly line icon up here, and then you've got all these different options. You can add, remove, invert, copy, paste, feather, color fill. Here's an example. I can just do a rectangle, and it'll fill with the color that's my active color at the moment. Or you can just do a selection without filling. So if I turn off color fill and do that, maybe I want to paint within it like that. It's a different form of masking, I guess. And there's a lot of things you can do with the selection tool. For example, I can select this area, then I can choose my transform tool, and I can transform that. And again, here we've got 4 different types of transforms I can do. I can do freeform, uniform, which locks the proportions or ratio and keeps it the same. We have distort, which allows me to fully just move these nodes around. Okay, back to painting. I've got one last thing to show you, but before that, if you're getting value from this video, please consider checking out my Patreon. You can get access to bonus videos and Procreate resources, but more importantly, Jaywalker Pictures is all about encouraging people to walk their own path in life and sharing the joy of drawing and creating. Thank you, and your support allows me to continue making videos for you. Okay guys, I think I'm done. I'm just going to call it with this one. I'm pretty happy with it, but I do want to show you the adjustments section. So you notice I've got like these two elements that are really in the foreground, and I want to blur them. So I can actually go up here to adjustments. I can do Gaussian blur, and I can blur it like that. And it just adds a really nice depth of field effect. You can actually do different types of blurs. So you've got motion blur. I can blur it in a direction. And if I move the pen up and down, you can see the direction of that blur is changing. So up and down changes the direction, and then left and right changes the amount. And the next thing I want to do is I want to sharpen the entire image, but you know, the whole image is split into many layers, and I can't actually flatten the image, but there is another way of doing it, which is essentially doing copy canvas and then pasting. So that's just copied the entire artwork and then pasted it into a new layer here. You can see I actually did that for an earlier version of the artwork, so let's have a look at it. It'll be really weird to see. Yeah, so that was my original sketch and kind of coloring, and this is how it looks now. So let's select that flattened layer, and then we're going to go up here to adjustments again, and we're going to do a sharpen. And so just maybe do about 30% sharpen, just to make sure things pop out. You'll especially notice like sharpen really makes a difference for things like small shadows, you know, little details like that. They'll really pop out a lot more. Now that we're finished, I do want to show you guys 3 things. So the first thing is, if I go to canvas and canvas information, I can actually see some interesting statistics. So I've done over 14,000 strokes. I've been working on this for 20 hours. It doesn't feel like 20 hours, but hey, that's what Procreate says. And total file size is 440 megs. The thing that I always check at the end is actually the layers section, because I'm always curious if I'm gonna run out of layers. It's just like this silly source of anxiety for me, because it's always nice to have a lot of layers. But yeah, let's have a look. I did 136 layers out of a maximum of 183. So I've got 47 left. Not bad. The second thing you can do when you finish is to share your image. So you can export it as, like, for example, a JPEG, send it to your phone or your MacBook or your computer. And the third thing you can do is go here to video, and you can actually play back your time-lapse replay. So here you can see my early sketch phase. It's pretty ugly, but yeah, it's a really cool feature to go back and relive your complete process. Anyway, that's it for the video. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you all in the next one.